All right, good afternoon, boys and girls. We're on lesson 57. Um, we're talking about probability today. So let's get started. Our objective for today is to describe an event as certain, likely, unlikely, or impossible. We're going to use fractions or percent to describe the chance that an event will occur or not occur, and we're going to find a probability of an outcome or experiment. Okay. So our joke for the day is, why did the fool swallow his laptop? And because he thought it was a tablet. Okay, so for today, our math vocab, there's a lot that you guys have to write down. So take some time to pause this film and no, I don't mind waiting. Go ahead and go do your math vocab. All right, so the new concept today is we're going to be talking about probability, okay? There are many situations whose future outcomes are uncertain, right? For example, we don't know if the weather's going to rain tomorrow, okay? It's probably likely it is going to rain tomorrow. Um, and that's just an educated guess. We don't know for sure that it's really going to rain tomorrow. It might rain or it might not rain. If we take an airplane flight, we might arrive early or we might arrive late, or we might even arrive on time. We don't know for certain in advance um, if those things will happen. Okay, and um, and that's what the probability is about. It's basically the measure of how likely that an event or a combination of events will happen. Okay, probabilities are numbers between 0 and 1. Okay, so between 0 and 1, there's probabilities, and it's always a fraction. Okay, an event that is certain to happen, like for example, like the sun will rise tomorrow, is certain that it will happen, has a probability of 1. Okay, we are for sure that it's going to happen. Okay, an event that is impossible has a probability of 0. Like the pigs will fly tomorrow. They're going to go rings and fly tomorrow. That is an event that is impossible that will happen tomorrow. Okay, so um, that probability, if it's impossible, is 0. Okay, um, if an event may or may not occur, then its probability is a fraction between 0 and 1. Okay, so if it's less likely to happen, it's a fraction that's smaller than 1/2. Okay, maybe it's 1/4, which would be right around here. Okay, maybe it's more likely, maybe it's 3/4, which is right around here. Okay, so fractions that are greater than a half, it's more likely to happen. Okay, the more likely an event, the closer it is to 1. The less likely an event, the closer it is to 0. Okay, probabilities can be expressed in fractions, decimals, or percents. And one of your vocab words today was chance. Okay, the word is chance. It's used to describe the likelihood of an event if it's going to happen. So what are the chances that it's going to rain tomorrow, right? So we're looking for a probability or a fraction that it might rain or might not rain. Okay, the expression 50-50 chance means that um, there's a 50% likelihood, okay, right in the middle, that it will or will not happen. Like, for example, if we have a coin and we're going to flip it heads or tails, okay, so the probability that a heads is going to come up is a 50-50 chance because it will either land on heads or tails, okay? And we're going to go over more about this later on. Um, So if you have a greater chance, it's going to be closer to 1. If it's a lesser chance you're going to have, it's going to be closer to 0, so smaller than 1/2. All right. So let's go ahead and look at a standard dot cube, a die or a dice. If one of them is rolled, which word best describe each event? Is it likely, unlikely, or impossible? Okay, let's look at scenario letter A. The cube will stop on a three dots on top. Okay, if you roll a 3, what's the likelihood that's going to happen? Well, what we're going to find out, there's only six faces of a dice, right? A die or a dot cube, and one of those faces is 3. Okay, so you have a 1 in 6 chance of getting a 3 on the top. So it's unlikely that you will get a 3. You will roll a 3. It's an unlikely chance that you will roll a 3. Does that make sense? Because, like I said before, if you have a 1/6 chance that's smaller than smaller than a half, that means that it's unlikely it's going to happen. Okay. Oops. Let me go back. Shoot. All right. Now, the cube will stop with more than 2 dots on top. Well, there's only two numbers, 1 and 2, on a dice that has 2 dots, right? Or less than 2 dots. Okay, so actually only one of the faces has less than 2 dots. So you have a 5/6 chance that that's going to happen, right? So it's likely it's going to happen. So remember, 5/6 is greater than 1/2. Okay, so it's likely to happen. Okay, so if the fraction is greater than a half, then it's likely. If the fraction is less than a half, then it's unlikely. Oops, I did it again. All right. The cube will stop with fewer than 7 dots on top. Well, all cubes, all dice cubes, basically have 6 numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you roll a die and the likelihood of you rolling a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, which is less than 7, right, is certain that you're going to do that if you roll a dot cube. Okay. Now, the cube will stop with more than 6 dots on the top. Well, a regular dot cube only goes to 6, so you can't have the dice roll a 7 or an 8 or a 9 or 10. So for letter D, that's impossible that that's going to happen. Okay. So for probability, we're working with unlikely, which is a fraction less than 1/2, likely, a fraction that is more than 1/2, certain, which is 1, that all possibilities lead to that, and impossible, which is that would never happen. Okay, let's go to example number 2. So the circle below is divided into 5 sides sectors. Each sector is labeled by one of these letters, A, B, C, or D. Or A, B, or C, excuse me. Suppose the spinner is spun and stops in one of the sectors. Find the probability of each of the possible outcomes, A, B, and C. Now, what you want to look at is the whole circle and how the pie shapes are divided. Okay, here's letter A, here's letter B. They're all kind of divided the same. Okay, so, but we have letter C that has more spots than A and B. So our first fraction for letter A will be 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spins, or 5. So our fraction for letter A would be 1/5. Our fraction for letter B would be 1/5 also, because it only has 1 out of the 5 spots. Now our fraction for letter C is 3/5, right, which is more than a half. All right, so we're going to find the probability of each of the possible outcomes. And look here what it says. Since outcome A corresponds to 1/5, remember I said it's 1 out of 5 slots, the probability of the spinner stopping on sector A is unlikely. Same thing with outcome B, it's unlikely, which is our probability is actually 1/5, 1 out of 5, right? Now for letter C, there are 3 pieces, so we have 3 out of 5 spots that we could possibly get. So our fraction probability for letter C is 3/5. Okay? Now, our probability that it would land on A, B, or C is 1, right? Because it's 5 out of 5 slots. Okay, does that make sense? If it doesn't, please write down your questions on the back. All right, now we're on letter 3. Example number 3, a bag contains 5 red marbles, 3 blue marbles, and 2 yellow marbles. Okay, so the first thing we need to know is how many marbles we have altogether. Okay, so we have 5 red marbles, 3 blue marbles, that's 8, plus 2 yellow marbles, which makes 10. So we need to find out what our probability if it's blue. Okay, so with the blue marbles, we have 3 blue marbles out of how many marbles? Which is 10, right? So our fraction, what we find here is that there's 3 out of 10. Okay. Now we got to find the probability that the marble is not blue. Okay, so um, if we pick a marble from the bag without looking, we have to find out the probability of it not being blue. Okay, so there's 10 marbles total, right? And if 3 are blue, that means 7 are not blue. Okay, so our probability would be 7 out of 10 that are not blue. Okay. For example number 4, Ben spun a spinner 60 times and recorded the outcome shown in the table below. Refer to the table to answer the questions. All right, so basically he spun a spinner, and these are the outcomes. There's sector 1, 2, and 3. We have 29 for this one. He spun 20 out of this one and 11 out of this one. So which of these spinners most likely represents the spinner Ben used? Okay, now we got to look here. Okay, these two are very similar. 1 and 2 are very close. 3 represents something that's not close. So most likely 3 would be a smaller sector than 1 or 2. Okay, so let's look at the things. These are pretty equal. Okay, however, we don't see any sector 4 here. So letter A cannot be chosen, right? And then letter B, they're equal sized. So we want to think, okay, most likely what would happen, I'm sorry, shoot, how did that happen? All right, most likely what would happen is that we would have close to equal numbers for the letter B. All right, now if we are on letter C, if this was the case, sector 2 and sector 3 would be very close, but it's not. We have almost double in sector 2. Okay, so letter C is probably not going to be it. Now we have letter D, which is has the most. Okay, now it has the most space here on of these sectors, and then sector 3 has less space. So this most likely is our spinner. Okay, that Ben was using. Okay, so now that's for question A. We're going to select D, and then we'll see if what I said was true. If Ben spins the spinner 10 times more, about how many times is the spinner likely to stop in sector 1? Well, let's look at the spinner, okay? If this is our spinner that we've chosen, how likely is this going to be one going to be chosen? Now, it's basically half of the circle. So if we spin it 10 times, what's half of that? That's probably 5 times, right? Okay, let me see if I could zoom. Goodness. Okay, and here's our solutions. So we see that half of the spinner is stopped in sector 1, so sector 1 is probably half of the spinner. Therefore, we are choosing the spinners C and D. All right, so one of these two is going to be it. The spinner stopped in sector 2 about twice as many times in sector C, so the best choice is spinner D. All right, there you go. Since about half of the spinners have stopped in sector 1, we would expect that the pattern would continue, and the spinner is likely to stop 5 times in sector 1. All right, so that answers our questions for letters A and B. Okay, almost done, guys. There you go. So here is our lesson practice, A through H. Make sure that you answer all the questions. If you have any questions, write those on the back so we can go over them in class. All right, have a great afternoon, and look forward to talking about probability with you. And it is certain that we will see you tomorrow. Talk to you later.